Thursday night, Stamford Bridge, without doubt, the bogey fixture of being a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Every single season, except one in the Premier League era, Tottenham have gone to Stamford Bridge and not got a victory. Am I expecting anything different tomorrow night? Frankly, no. But I'm going to go into that and explain why in today's match preview of the Chelsea versus Tottenham Hotspur game tomorrow night. It's a nightmare, frankly. At least it feels that way as a Spurs fan. Just too much trauma, too many experiences, too much negativity. It's hard to get out of it. And having lost 2 games on the spin heavily, or at least what felt like heavily against Arsenal and very heavily against Newcastle, it doesn't fill me with hope going into Stamford Bridge. But I will try and find some positivity in this match preview. Before I get into it, please do give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already, at Barnaby Slater _, where I give you daily spurred on podcast content. And also, if you like podcasts, I put it out on all the podcast platforms, so go over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give me a subscribe or a follow there, and you can become a Spurred On Pro member on YouTube or a Patreon member. All the details are in the description boxes below. So let's talk about Chelsea, and we can't talk about this fixture without talking about the reverse game from earlier in the season at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. If memory serves, it was the first game we lost of the season after our 10-match winning and drawing start. 8 wins, 2 draws. Chelsea came to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Night game, everybody completely pumped, and arguably Tottenham overly pumped, overly motivated, flying into challenges, and it wrecked it for us. So let's go into it a little bit. I think the best way to describe it, chaos, drama, mayhem. It was one of the most chaotic games in Premier League history. I mean, up there with the Battle of the Bridge, frankly, in 2015-2016, which was equally chaotic. But on that night, Mark Clattenburg, the referee, decided he wasn't going to give anyone a red card. But the referee back earlier this season didn't have any options. If a lot of people forget, we actually went 1-0 up through Deki Kulusevski early on in the game, cut in from the right, put it towards the far corner, deflected in off Thiago Silva. Not long after that, though, Destiny Udogie, what a player, and we miss him now. He's injured for the rest of the season, of course, but he went in with a 2-footed challenge on Raheem Sterling, and he was very fortunate not to pick anything of Sterling's ankle up with his 2-footed challenge, but he got a yellow card for that. Not long after that, Raheem Sterling got a disallowed goal himself, kind of just jinking through our defence, getting a couple of deflections, and luckily it hit his arm on the way through. So that was the first disallowed goal for that handball. Then Christian Romero, overly pumped, overly motivated, overly Argentinian, some would say, during this game. He kicked Levi Colwill. That was kind of not deemed to be a red card offence by the referee. Then Chelsea had a disallowed Moise Caicedo goal because a man was standing in front of the keeper, deemed to be offside. But during that passage of play, Romero had gone in to get a tackle in the box. He'd got the ball, but with the follow-through, he'd taken the ankle out of the Chelsea player. I can't remember who it was. I think it might be Enzo Fernandez, actually. And that was called back for VAR. Now, at the time, I very much thought that was a red card. But actually, there have been loads of different occasions in the Premier League this season since then where the consistency hasn't been there because other players have done that, where they've got the ball first and then got the kind of middle section of the ankle with the follow-through, and it's not been given as a red card. So I think Romero was a bit unlucky. However, he does have a reputation, of course, and he did go in incredibly hard. It wasn't like it wasn't like a mid-pressure level tackle. He went in with everything. So equally, at the time, like I said, I thought it was a red card. So then that was a penalty, which was put away for 1-1. Then Udogie got his second yellow card for naively sliding in really late. And then after that, what we remember of the game, of course, was the Ange Postecoglou high line. Spurs with 9 players, Eric Dyer at the back, or who we now know as Champions League semi-finals, Eric Dyer. I have to mention it, last night he put in a very, very good performance, whilst around him, Kim Min-jae had an absolute shocker. The player that lots of Spurs fans wanted to replace Eric Dyer made 2 huge mistakes to give Real Madrid probably the favourite tag going into that second leg at the Bernabeu. But impressive from Dyer. Sorry, I have to say it. But yeah, the rest of the game against Chelsea was the high line on the halfway line. Chelsea getting in over and over. And it took them till I think, the last 10-15 minutes before they finally got the second goal. And then it was Nicholas Jackson and he scored all 3 after that. But that was kind of the first proper showing this season of what Ange Postecoglou have been talking about, which is trying to make the players understand the system and understand the front foot nature of what he wants, even in adversity. So that's what happened. It was our first defeat, 4-1. It was painful, but it also came with some positives in terms of the long term. Now, let's talk about where both Spurs and Chelsea are in the Premier League at the moment. Spurs in 5th, as we know, 7 points behind Aston Villa. We do have 2 games in hand. One of those is tomorrow night, of course, which doesn't really bode well in my eyes, but maybe Spurs can surprise me. Maybe we can go to Stamford Bridge when I least expect it and turn something on. Chelsea are in 9th on 48 points. They've won 13, drawn 9, lost 11. I'll be honest, when I read those stats, I thought, I was surprised to hear that they'd won more than they'd lost. I mean, certainly the way that the Chelsea fans talk about them and their season, you would not imagine that. Now, as you know, if you watch my match previews, I like to see where each team is comparative to where the match is being played. So this one's at Stamford Bridge. So Chelsea in the home table are 9th, so consistent. Won 8, drawn 4, lost 4. Spurs in the away table are 5th, just like we are in the main table. Won 6, drawn 6, and lost 4. Here comes the rub, though. Spurs have only won once at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League era, from 1992. In fact, by my reckoning, we've played 63 games in the Premier League against Chelsea. Tottenham have only won 8 times. That's home and away. So we've only won at Stamford Bridge once. That was, I think, on April Fool's Day 2018. I was at a wedding with my girlfriend at the time, and we were sat on different tables. She was on like the main table because she was a maid of honour, and I was sat on a different table, and I was probably very rudely watching the game on my iPhone while the speeches were going on. And when Eriksen scored from outside the box with an absolute rasper, I basically couldn't stop myself from jumping up a bit. Very, very embarrassing and not good boyfriending, but what a game. What a finish from Dele Alli for the second from a beautiful Eric Dyer long ball. I want to talk about how, in general, Chelsea are much better against the top teams. They've really shown that this season. If you take away that game against Arsenal where they got absolutely pumped the other week, that's kind of an outlier. Against the top teams, they've been a lot better. In terms of their more recent home results, 6-0 versus Everton, very impressive. 4-3 against Man United, that was a late comeback. 2-2 against Burnley, not a great result, but like Tottenham, actually, they've struggled against the teams who set up in kind of more defensive ways. Although, actually, Burnley under Kompany don't really do that. It was actually just a great performance from Kompany's Burnley. They won 3-2 at home to Newcastle. They did lose 4-2 at home to Wolves, but that's an example of what I'm talking about. Gary O'Neill setting up pretty directly and hitting them on the break time and time again. And then they beat Fulham 1-0 at home. So Chelsea's results at home have been pretty decent in the last 6 matches. Only lost to Wolves and drew with Burnley, so not too bad. And obviously in their last Premier League game, they were 2-0 down away at Aston Villa at half-time. I thought that game was done and dusted last weekend, but they showed some desire. Really good comeback. Got it back to 2-2 thanks to a beautiful Conor Gallagher left-footed strike into the top corner curler. Really fantastic. One of the best things he's done this season, actually. And of course, there is still talk about Conor Gallagher's contract and whether there's a possibility of Spurs trying to get him before the June the 30th deadline when Chelsea need to sell some players. So that's another narrative from this game. And then, arguably, in that Villa game, Chelsea should have had a winner. Last kick of the game, given as a push by VAR. They actually saw it as a clear and obvious error in the run-up to the goal, and I don't think it was. So, yeah, Chelsea showing some desire there, which goes completely against what the Chelsea fans and Chelsea influencers will have you think. The way that, for instance, Rory Jennings talks about Maurizio Pochettino and Clearlake at Chelsea and how appalling they are, and Pochettino being the worst manager of all time. I'm not sure it really scans. I personally think Pochettino is the right man at Chelsea, and they've had a lot of injuries, and obviously more than just the injuries. He's had thrown at him by Clearlake, the owners of the club, all these young players who are of course talented, thrown together on massive long contracts, and it's impossible to kind of blend a team together when that's all happened at once. So it's going to take time, and I think if they sack Pochettino in the summer, it may appease the fans, but I do not know who they think they're going to get in that will do a better job. I mean, I've seen some of Rory's videos, and he genuinely thinks Jose Mourinho is the answer, but I think that is complete madness. I really do. Jose Mourinho has proven in his last 2 or 3 jobs that dealing with young players these days, dealing with Gen Z, millennial young players, is not what he's good at. He only really uses the stick, not much of the carrot, and that is not going to work. So, I would love to see that happen because it's not going to be the answer for Chelsea. In terms of team news, Chelsea definitely have 8 out, including Reece James and Ben Chilwell. They have doubts over 5 more, including Raheem Sterling and Thiago Silva. Spurs, obviously, I think looks like Werner's going to be out after he came off early against Arsenal. And as we know, Destiny joins the long-term injuries like Manor Solomon, Fraser Forster, etc., etc. So this is the team that I would go for. I'm not going to guess the team that I think Big Ange will go for because I'm always wrong. I would go for Vicario, Pedro Porro, Ben Davis, Christian Romero and Mickey van der Ven. Then I'd bring Basuma back in for Højbjerg. I wanted Højbjerg to come in, but he didn't help out Ben Davis as much on the left as I thought he was going to. So I'd bring Basuma back. I'd bring Pat Matasar back in midfield. I'd play Kulusevski instead of Maddison. I'd give Maddison a bit of a rest, a chance to watch on from the sidelines for a bit, just as Kulusevski has had to do, as Brennan Johnson had to do earlier in the season. He's still recovering from his injury, and he's just not at top form. But I would play Kulusevski in the kind of advanced 8. Then I'd play Son on the left, Richarlison as the 9, and Brennan Johnson on the right. Let me know in the comments what team you would pick, what you think the score will be. Are you as nervous and negative as I am? Or am I being too negative? Let me know. Do drop the video a like. Thank you so much for watching. Press subscribe and go over to the podcast platforms. Give me a subscribe and a follow then. And only £1 a month to become a Spurred On Pro or Patreon member. Support my daily content. I really appreciate it. Good luck tomorrow night. Come on, you Spurs.